Victor, do we need this now? Do we need the projector now? I would like someone to help me move this mic to Dr. Wamwara. I request that we get started. So let's stand up for the anthems. And thereafter, we are going to have a word of prayer from Dean Law, Moi University. And one of the things you'll note is that we are going to have a third anthem, which is the Egerton University anthem, just after the East African anthem.
Let us pray. Father, we thank you for the gift of the universe. Give us the wisdom to know how to take care of it, both for now and for posterity. Thank you for the gift of Egerton University and the School of Law for the conceiving this and making it happen. Thank you for the partners that have made it happen, and thank you for everyone who is participating. Will you give us journey mercies even as we want to speak and share? I pray that you may be with us as we begin, even to the end. For all these things and more, do we ask, believing and trusting in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you so much. We can get seated and thank you so much, Dr. Joseph John O'Mara, Dean, Faculty of Law, Moi University, for the prayer. Even if it was not in the program, there is no way we would have passed that, especially when we know there is an SDA elder in the building who can bless us before we move forward. My name is Kioko Kivandi. I'm from Egerton University, and I will be moderating this session with my colleague Macharia Kaguru from UNEP, who will be taking us through the opening remarks. It's not really my responsibility to welcome you but to the conference, but just allow me to say that we are highly excited to have you today with us, and perhaps make this announcement that this child called the Follow-Up National Legal Aid Conference is today 4 years old. So we can clap for that. So I don't know at what point we shall be singing a happy birthday song for it, but it feels very nice to have it hit the 4th year. Ladies and gentlemen, we have with us the Director Law Division, UNEP, Professor Patricia Kamere-Mbote. We have our Vice Chancellor, Egerton University, Professor Isaac Kibwage. We have the County Director, International Development International Development Law Organization, IDLO, Madam Teresa Mugaza. We have with us a representative of the Chairperson, Parliamentary Caucus on Climate Action, Honorable Moses Kajwang, who will be represented by Honorable Senator Catherine Muma. We have the Principal Judge, Environment and Land Court, Honorable Justice Oscar Amugo Angote. We also have former Chief Registrar of the Judiciary, Honorable Anne Amadi. We have the Acting CEO, National Legal Aid Service, NLAS, Ms. Frisia Gidumbi. We also have, of course, the team from Egerton University that is led by our Dean Faculty of Law, Dr. Ruth Aura, and so many other scholars in the house, led by Professor PLO Lumumba. We have our Director Examinations, Professor Gilbert Oboyere. We have our Director Marketing, Egerton University, Professor Nzula Kitaka, and so many other dignitaries that we shall be recognizing their presence as time goes by. And of course, all of you, thank you so much for gracing our occasion. As you can see in the program, and for those who don't, in case you don't have a hard copy of the program, you can also check your emails for the soft copy. We are going to have the opening remarks now. No, we are going to have the welcome remarks, and thereafter we are going to have the opening remarks, and immediately after that we are going to have the keynote session from the Director Law Division, UNEP, Professor Patricia Kamere-Mbote, and a media briefing immediately after that. So Without wasting a lot of time, I'll be inviting now the Dean Faculty of Law, Dr. Ruth Aura, to come and speak to us. And maybe as she does that, I don't know what comes to your mind when you hear about climate and also climate change. And especially at this time in Kenya, where I feel like, personally, I feel like our natural environment is polluted. Our built environment is also polluted. Our political environment is also getting polluted day after day, and so on and so forth. Are we living in the midst of pollution? Anyway, let's see. Let's clap for the Dean Faculty of Law, Egerton University, Dr. Ruth Aura, as she comes to give her opening remarks.
Let me ride on the protocols already established and just go to my welcome remarks. Good morning. On behalf of Egerton University and specifically the Faculty of Law, I extend warm welcome to all distinguished guests, speakers, participants to this 4th National Legal Aid Conference. It is indeed a privilege for us to gather here today under the theme Climate Change and Environmental Justice. This is an important moment when the consequences of climate change are becoming increasingly evident and the need for urgent action is more pressing than ever. As a faculty, we are committed to fostering dialogue and action on these critical issues, and we are honored to provide a platform for this important discussion at the aegis of United Nations Development Program. Before I delve into these remarks, I've seen one of the very special people that at the beginning of the conferences that Egerton University has had, and with a blessing with our Vice Chancellor present and seated there, is the one Dr. Mutua Kituku. Dr. Mutua, can you just raise up your hand so our VC can see you? On 20th March 2020, I had a conversation with Dr. Kituku, then a representative of UNDP. They had provided us with some funds to run legal aid program at the faculty, and I told them it's not good enough to run legal aid. We should be doing something useful, bringing stakeholders around, not only for our students, but all stakeholders in the justice sector, to once in a while be dialoguing on critical issues that affect access to justice in the country. And that is how these conferences were conceived, and for the first time, we held our conference in 2020 with the support of United Nations Development Program and European Union. So, because the first one was a success, and because we still got the blessings from our Vice Chancellor, they were able to fund the second and the third one. And today, we are very privileged to have United Nations Environment Program under the leadership of Senior Counsel Professor Kamari Mbote, seated there, leading the team and providing guidance, both financially and technical, to ensure that this conference, building on the successes of the past, is also successful. So, Professor Patricia, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I think my I'll stop there because it is not by day. I have many people who are special to us today. Will continue engaging in the with the conversations. I'll make it short, and I'm going to give you my longer speech so you can read it in the interest of time. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much. Another round of applause to the Dean, please. And she has done us a lot of good by introducing the midwife of the child I just talked about a while back, who was born 4 years ago. I feel like all of us were born environmentalists, and maybe for those who don't, come from Kenya, but for us who grew up in Kenya, and especially among the Bantus, one of the ways we were taught to love the environment is to learn to speak the language of non-human, items, like birds, like insects. And I remember when we were young, there used to be a certain insect that we would talk to, especially when we are weeding. You would only find it when you are weeding, because that's when it would pop up. So you would pick it up and start talking to it and ask. You would call its name. I've forgotten the name now. You would call its name and ask it, show me where I will get a life partner. Then it would go round and round and round and round, and finally it would point to a certain direction. If it pointed to the direction of someone you like, you would really feel very, very happy. But if it pointed to a direction where there's someone you don't like, you would really get disappointed. I don't know whether for those who are married today, if you are to meet that insect, whether you would feel that it gave you the right answer, I don't know. Anyway, I'm just trying to say, during the 2-3 days we'll be here, let's try to learn the language of nature. And having said that, then, allow me to invite a gentleman who works with an organization who I think one of their roles is to talk the language of nature. That's UNEP, and I'm going to invite Alvin Gachie, who is a legal officer there, to also come and give welcome remarks. Asante sana. Let's clap for him as he comes to talk to us in the language of nature.
I'll try to speak in the language of nature with all protocols observed. Good morning, distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, and participants. It's my great honor to welcome you all to this high-level conference, which is organized by the Faculty of Law Legal Aid Project at Egerton University in partnership with UNEP. I'd like to thank our partners, Egerton University, particularly the Vice Chancellor, Professor Isaac Kibwage, the Dean, Faculty of Law, Dr. Ruth Aura, Robert Mutembei, the organizing committee, and my colleagues at UNEP, led by Professor Patricia Kamerimbote, Director of the Law Division, that made this conference a reality. Distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, participants, today we gather at Lake Naivasha at a critical juncture in our global fight against climate change and the quest for environmental justice. Right outside this conference room, we can see the impacts of climate change clearly. With a 30% increase in mean annual rainfall between 2010 and 2020, Naivasha was hit by catastrophic floods that lasted for nearly a year. The rising levels of the lake attributed to climate change displaced over 1,400 residents in Kehoto and Kamere Beach. What's the impact? Destruction worth millions of shillings, loss of lives, and loss of savings. As representatives from government, regional and intergovernmental institutions, academia, civil society organizations, and development partners, you bring together a wealth of knowledge and experience. The climate crisis is a shared challenge. It knows no borders. It disproportionately affects the poor, vulnerable, and marginalized communities across the globe. Our discussions today aim to explore strategies to ensure that all people, regardless of their socioeconomic status, have access to environmental justice. From UNEP, we recognize that addressing climate change and fostering environmental justice are intertwined. Effective climate action cannot be achieved without acknowledging the socio-economic disparities existing within our societies. So our efforts today must focus on generating practical strategies to enhance access to environmental justice for those most affected. This conference provides a platform for stimulating dialogue on the opportunities, gaps, and solutions in enhancing climate responses, adaptation, and mitigation to the climate crisis from a global perspective. Together, we'll critique ongoing efforts and explore the roles of states as critical pillars in climate change and environmental justice actions. The aim is to develop a handbook for legal aid on environmental justice with recommendations and innovative ideas which are tailored to the Kenyan context. We aspire that this handbook will not only serve our local communities, but will also inspire similar initiatives across the globe, contributing to the global movement for environmental justice. Through our discussions, we'll seek your valuable input on strategies and recommendations for enhancing access to justice for vulnerable and marginalized groups. We will showcase innovative approaches to providing legal aid for environmental justice, and we'll also share good practices from various stakeholders. We here have a unique opportunity to learn from one another and to build synergies that can lead to tangible action. So as we embark on this journey of exploration and reflection, let's remember that the stakes are high. As we know from the Lake Naivasha example, climate change is not just an environmental issue. It's a question of human rights, equity, and justice. It's our responsibility to ensure that the voices of the marginalized are not only heard, but also prioritized in our actions and policies. And so I encourage you to engage openly, share your thoughts, and collaborate in the spirit of achieving our common goal, a just and equitable future for all in the face of climate change. Together, let's advance the cause of environmental justice, and let us strive for a sustainable world for generations to come. Thank you, and I wish you a fruitful and inspiring conference.
Thank you so much, Alvin, for speaking to us and speaking the language of nature. And now I am going to invite to the floor our chief host, who is the Vice Chancellor, Egerton University, Professor Isaac Kibwage. Professor Isaac Kibwage is a pharmacist. Let's give him the clap of pharmacists as he comes to the floor.
Thank you, MC. I didn't know that there's a club for pharmacists. Morning, ladies and gentlemen. The Director, Law Division at UNEP, Professor Patricia Kameri Mbote, the Principal Judge, Environment and Land Courts, Honorable Justice Oscar Angote, Country Director, International Development Law Organization, Fraser Mugatsa, Chairperson of Parliamentary Caucus on Climate Change Action, Honorable Moses Kajwangi, represented by Honorable Senator Catherine Moma, Acting CEO, National Legal Aid Service, Fresia Gidumbi, former Chief Registrar of the Judiciary, Honorable Anne Amadi, Professor Pierre Lumumba, Dean Law at Egerton, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this function. I normally say that since this is being hosted by Egerton, I welcome you to Egerton. It is my distinct honor to welcome you to the 4th National Legal Aid Conference on Access to Justice, co-hosted by Egerton University with support from the United Nations Environmental Programme. We gather here today under the urgent theme of climate change and environmental justice. This theme addresses most pressing challenges: how we can ensure justice, equity, and fairness during an accelerating climate crisis that disproportionately affects the most vulnerable among us. The first 3 national legal aid conferences were hosted by Egerton University, courtesy of financial support from the European Union and United Nations Development Programme. And this support played a crucial role in ensuring those events succeeded. Today's conference builds on those successes. It is the link between climate change and human rights is undeniable. It affects access to essential resources like food, water, housing, and healthcare. And as the planet warms, these inequalities are further exacerbated, particularly for the most marginalized and excluded groups in our societies. I don't know how many of us recall our youth and where we are. When I was growing up, I used to get out of the house and there is mist everywhere. Jogging 7 kilometers to the primary school where I was going, I could arrive there numb. We had rivers, I don't know if they call them streams or rivers, where we could swim. These days you hardly see the mist. The rivers have just become valleys. They only carry water during the rainy season. And I come from a place where there is plenty of rain because it's conventional rain. So I keep wondering, is there anybody who's not seeing change? Is it because it's warming, or is it because we are generally degrading our environment? I'll give you a few examples. Let me proceed. This conference comes at a critical juncture where the global response to climate change must be rooted in justice, environmental justice. The impacts of climate change do not affect all of people equally. We know that those who have contributed the least to greenhouse gas emissions, such as the poor, vulnerable, and marginalized communities, often bear the greatest burdens. This includes women, indigenous peoples, and those living in rural and underdeveloped areas whose lives and livelihoods depend heavily on natural resources. This conference will acknowledge the environmental challenges, but I hope it will also confront the reality that climate change amplifies existing socio-structural inequalities. As the concept note for this event aptly states, the consequences of exploitation of natural resources, pollution, and extreme weather are deepening poverty and reversing decades of development gains. This makes the pursuit of environmental justice an urgent priority for all of us. 2 years ago, I think we had a serious drought in the country. And I've already said that there was problems of scarcity of water. And the men were escorting their wives early in the morning to go and fetch water. And if you got 120 jerrycan, you must leave. So others can also do what? Can also get water. We are seeing the effects practically. We are seeing the dangers that arise from ignoring the changes in our climate. We are seeing the need to actually go back and try not only to conserve, but to reverse the degradation we are watching or we are seeing. I can imagine an altercation happening in that place where people are getting water, because those are few wells. And these guys normally don't escort their wives empty-handed like I came. They normally have what? A panga. You know what a panga is? And they are very hot-headed Kisis. So it can really turn very tragic. And if we can reach an amicable way of sorting out the resources before such happens, that will be very good. Distinguished participants, one remarkable aspect of this conference is the diversity of perspectives it brings together. We have participants from government, civil society, academia, the legal fraternity, and the international organizations. This diversity is crucial because addressing the multifaceted challenges of climate change and environmental justice requires collaborative, cross-sectoral approaches. We need policymakers, we need legal experts, environmentalists, development partners, and advocates for marginalized communities to work together to design solutions that are inclusive, equitable, and sustainable. At the core of this gathering is the objective to scrutinize the role of justice systems in responding to the climate crisis. Access to justice is a fundamental human right. Yet, with climate change, many communities face barriers to obtaining the legal protection and the remedies they need. We must ensure that justice systems are equipped to handle the complex legal and ethical challenges posed by climate change. This includes ensuring that laws are in place to protect the environment, promote accountability for environmental degradation, and uphold the right of future generations. The recent global developments in environmental law, including the landmark recognition of the right to clean, healthy, and sustainable environment by the United Nations Human Rights Council, offer a foundation for advancing environmental justice. However, as we move from policy to practice, the key question remains: how can we ensure that these global commitments translate into concrete actions that benefit the most affected communities amongst us? One of the key breakthroughs from COP27 was the establishment of the Loss and Damage Fund, a significant acknowledgement of the rights of vulnerable countries to receive financial support for climate-induced damages. Yet, as we look forward to its operationalization, we must critically examine how this fund can actually promote justice and equity. It is essential that the fund is not just about compensation. It should also build resilience and empower communities to recover and thrive in the face of climate disasters. Ladies and gentlemen, as we reflect on the progress made since that COP27, it is important to acknowledge the significant developments that took place at COP28, which was held in Dubai last year. COP28 marked a major milestone in the global climate agenda with the operationalization of the Loss and Damage Fund, securing over $726 million in commitment to support vulnerable countries already experiencing the devastating impacts of climate change. While this is a positive step, it remains only a fraction of the funding required to meet the growing needs of those most affected, including women, marginalized communities, and others in developing countries. The conference also saw renewed commitments to climate finance, with a focus on calling up efforts to meet the ambitious targets of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade. As we look ahead to COP29 in Azerbaijan, the global community must continue to push for robust, inclusive, and equitable climate action to ensure that no one is left behind in this critical fight for our planet's future. In light of this, we must also address the specific vulnerabilities faced by women who are disproportionately impacted by climate change due to their roles in managing resources and sustaining livelihoods in many communities. Gender justice is an integral part of environmental justice, and we must ensure that climate policies and actions take into account the unique needs and the contributions of women. As we proceed with the discussions over the next few days, I urge all participants to focus not only on identifying the challenges, but also on actionable solutions. Our goal should be to leave this conference with a stronger, clear understanding of how we can enhance responses, adaptations, and resilience to climate change from a justice-oriented perspective. I would like to extend my gratitude to the Faculty of Law at Egerton, led by Dr. Aura, as well as all the organizers, speakers, and the participants who have made this conference possible. I'm confident that the insights and exchanges that will take place here will contribute meaningfully to advancing climate and environmental justice, not only in Kenya, but globally. As I conclude, I want to remind each of us that we have a moral and ethical obligation to address the climate crisis. The decisions we make today will determine the future for generations to come. Let this conference be a step towards building a world where justice prevails in every aspect of our response to the climate crisis. I would like to conclude with the words of the late environmentalist and the Nobel Prize winner, Wangari Maathai, and I quote, "In the course of history, there comes a time when humanity is called to shift to a new level of consciousness, to reach a higher moral ground, a time when we have to shed our fear and give hope to each other. That time is now, and ladies, you are at the glare of publicity." These words remind us that we are not only responding to the climate crisis, but are also shaping the future of justice, equity, and sustainability for generations to come. Let this conference serve as a catalyst for that shift in consciousness, where we collectively commit to addressing climate change through a lens of justice and fairness for all. Thank you, and I wish you fruitful deliberations.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Mashalia Kaguru. As my colleague Kyoka said, I'll be co-moderating this conference with him. As we get into the next session, so far I have picked up a few things from welcoming remarks that we've gotten from the Dean, Dr. Aura, Alvin, my colleague, and the Vice Chancellor. And I think we are getting into the context of what we would be discussing. And what I have heard them say is to say that we are living climate change, we are living environmental pollution. So this is not a far-fetched idea or a far-fetched dream. We can live and see the impacts. What I also have gotten is the idea or the fact that environment, pollution, and climate change are not just environmental issues, they are not climate change issues, they have multiplicity of impacts that affect socio-economic, cultural rights of persons. Then what I have also gotten is the reality that the environmental and climate change issues are so huge in terms of the magnitude of the impact that all of us are required or have a role to play in combating or in dealing or providing solutions from civil society, from UNEP, from universities and academics. From every person, you have a role to play, from government, to judiciary, and all of us. My task is very simple, is to moderate the opening remarks and to simply say that just as the call has been made, I'm just reading at their book of abstracts, and it says, the scale of environmental and climate change crisis means that no single institution, government, or entity can tackle these immense challenges alone. It requires a collaborative effort that brings together policymakers, legal experts, civil societies, and impacted communities. When I look at the participation throughout the conference, and especially the next session, it's a reality, or it's a simple implementation of that statement, that all of us have a role to play, from lawyers to academic institutions to government and policymakers. So in this session, I'm going to invite different justice sector players to address us on their opening remarks to set us into the context of the topic, speaking from different angles. And to start us off, I will invite Madam Felicia Kitumbi, the acting CEO of National Legal Aid Service, to please give us her opening remarks. If you could please welcome her with that clap.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. That's better. Allow me to adopt the protocol previously established. Let me start by appreciating the organizers of the 4th National Legal Aid Conference on Access to Justice for not only inviting me to speak on behalf of the National Legal Aid Service, but also recognizing the role of National Legal Aid Service as the state agent mandated to deliver legal aid services in this country. It's a privilege and honor to be here today. Sometime early this year, during the long rain season, I sat at the corner of my office looking through the window. Outside, I could see the ongoing raging storms and the rising waters. I was literally stuck in the office. I could not leave. I thought of the happenings around that time, the flash floods, people being swept away by the floods, and the thousands of displaced from their homes. The disaster happening at that time due to the heavy rains as a result of the damages of the climate change. I don't know what was your experience during that time. Ladies and gentlemen, what I experienced that evening was not just a crisis caused by the heavy rains. I saw a humanitarian crisis as a result of climate change due to our inaction in combating challenges posed by the environmental degradation. What is more disheartening is the fact that majority of our citizens are not prepared to deal with the climate crisis, whose impacts are leading to loss of lives and livelihoods. The escalating climate change crisis remains a pressing global issue, presenting significant risks to environmental sustainability and the well-being of future generations. Further, the adverse effects of climate change threaten to observe of the rule of law and the maintenance of social order. In the response to the challenges associated with climate change, governments, policymakers, individuals, international entities, and academic institutions have been instituting measures to counter these adverse effects. Ladies and gentlemen, for this reason, we must seize the moment through the concerted environmental justice intervention to save ourselves and future generations for the impending climatic of our inaction. If we fail to manage climate change now, we will create an environment so hostile that lives and livelihoods will be destroyed. At the National Legal Aid Service, our mandate is to serve the indigent, marginalized, and vulnerable community with legal aid services. In our outreach legal programs to serve the marginalized communities, we have painfully discovered that they do not only suffer from inaccessibility to legal services, but are among the group worst affected by climate change. These are people who suffer most from the storm at its worst, drought at its severity, and extreme heat at its peak. In the year 2020, NLAS had first-hand experience when we had to cut short our mobile legal aid clinics in the marginal counties of Isiolo, Wajir, Marsabit, and Mandera due to severe drought. It is for this reason we must continue advocating for the environment justice so that the less fortunate members of our society can be shielded from the adverse effect of climate change. Environmental justice demands that we must contribute towards achieving socio-economic equality and justice for the marginalized counties. The reality is that when considering issues on environmental justice, we are not only finding solutions to mitigating the adverse effects of climate change, but also addressing the plight of the vulnerable people in our society who are most hit by the climate crisis. A symbol of understanding of environmental justice states that it's the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people in the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulation, and policies. This, to my mind, can only be achieved when everyone enjoys the same degree of protection from environmental justice and health hazards caused by climate change, and for everyone to have a healthy environment in which to live. For us to enforce environmental justice, it's our combined duty to combat the threat posed by climate change, which has become more than just an environment issue. Its impacts are being felt in the sector, including health, agriculture, the economy, peace, and security. Environmental justice calls for fair distribution of environmental benefits and burdens. It demands that we listen to uplift the voice of those who are most affected by environmental degradation. We must advocate for policy that address these inequalities, ensuring that everyone, regardless of their socio-economic status, has access to clean air, water, and health environment. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted that part of the agenda in this conference is the presentation of the Handbook on Climate Change and Environment Justice. It's my belief that the developed handbook will serve as a comprehensive resource to the benefits of both the relevant stakeholder in access to justice and marginalized members of our society by sensitizing them on how to combat the effects of climate changes. It is our responsibility as stakeholders in access to justice to keep the conversation going and to walk the talk of advocating for a good environment. It's only through this that we'll change the face of the world and improve the quality of the life for everyone, in particular the marginalized group. As I conclude, I would like to leave you with a quote by Albert Einstein, which states, "The world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who watch them without doing anything." The environment is our heritage, and we must do something to protect it. We must quicken the intervention needed to address climate change. We must remember that the fight against climate change and environmental justice is not just a duty, it is a moral, ethical, and legal obligation. For all of us, we cannot expect different results from a continued lifestyle that has led to climate crisis if we not change. As we are all seated here, we need to ask ourselves, what role are we playing as actors in the justice sector? It is time we include environmental justice in combating the effects of climate change. As has been repeatedly said, the three most important things we can do, we are to stop the activity that causes climate change, enhance our resilience to effects of climate change, and continue the talk about climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Acting CEO. And it's good to hear from an institution, a government agency that primarily deals with provision of legal aid services. I liked the way you characterized the floods that we witnessed at some point, and you said that it was a humanitarian crisis that could lead to a breakdown of rule of law, and it could also lead to breakdown of social order. Just emphasizing the point that it's not just about the rains, it comes with other socio-economic and social fabrics of the society. And the fact that most of your clients are indigenous people, the most vulnerable of us in the society who need to access justice in all manner. And then you said that the reinforcing manner of the catastrophe is that the same people who would be majorly affected by the floods would at the same time be the people affected by droughts when it happens, and would also be affected by heat waves if it were to come. So that's a good perspective to it. Allow me to welcome Chairperson, Parliamentary Caucus on Climate Change, presented by Senator Catherine Muma. Please could come and give us your opening remarks. A clap as she comes.
Good morning, everybody. The Vice Chancellor, Egerton University, Professor Isaac Kibwage, Director, Law Division, UNEP, Professor Patricia Mbote, the Principal Judge, Land and Environment Court, Justice Oscar Ngote, the Dean of the Faculty of Law, Egerton University, Dr. Ruth Aura Odhiambo, the Acting CEO, National Legal Aid Services, Fresha Gathumbi, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Senate Caucus on Climate Change, it is a profound honor to address you today on a matter that not only defines our present, but also charts the course for our future. That is climate action. The realities of climate change are with us now, and its effects are being felt across our regions, from food insecurity to displacement to the loss of livelihoods for millions of people. As we are all aware, climate change disproportionately affects the most vulnerable communities, from the arid lands of Turkana, in our case, to the coastal regions of our country and indeed across the globe. We are tasked not only with making promises on international stages like the Paris Agreement, but with turning those commitments into tangible actions that bring real benefits to our people. As legislators, we note the unique position we are in regard to influencing the policies that will shape how we respond to this crisis, how we protect the vulnerable, and how we ensure that our actions today provide a sustainable future for all. We have had the privilege of working closely with many of you as we strive to ensure that the commitments of our government has made, the government has made under Paris Agreement and indeed any other international treaties that they have and will make are not only implemented but monitored and evaluated with the utmost transparency and accountability. Our mandate as a caucus is clear. We must hold our governments accountable for the promises they make and ensure that these promises translate into concrete, life-changing actions for our people. To achieve this, under the auspices of the Africa Network of Parliamentarians for Climate Change, this is a network of MPs from across Africa who are passionate about driving climate action in their countries, including chairpersons of environment and climate change committees in parliaments, and others with an interest in matters climate action. We have developed a comprehensive monitoring and accountability tool that is already transforming the way we oversee climate policies and government programs in some of our countries. This tool is intended to facilitate legislators to track government performance, ensuring that climate-related expenditures are aligned with the desired outcomes and that governments are delivering value for money. Through this tool, legislators can assess how our policies are impacting communities, measure progress against national and international climate goals, and ensure that we are keeping our governments on course. The tool integrates AI-powered analytics, a data repository, and real-time tracking features, making it an indispensable resource for informed legislative action. By leveraging this tool, we want to no longer be bound by anecdotal evidence, but we want to make decisions based on hard data and verifiable metrics. This is a new era of evidence-based governance, of tech-driven and data-driven planning, and we, as a caucus, are working to mobilize all legislators to embrace this new order and this tool fully. To complement the tool, the caucus has also developed a model climate law, a legislative framework that amalgamates best practices in climate law and policy from around the world. This model law provides a holistic approach to climate legislation, covering everything from carbon mitigation and adaptation strategies to climate financing, enforcement mechanisms, and ensuring public participation in decision-making processes. The model law is designed to ensure that our climate actions are inclusive, just, and focused on protecting those who are most vulnerable to climate change. It lays the ground for renewable energy adoption, biodiversity conservation, sustainable agriculture, and the promotion of green industries. It also embeds climate justice as a core principle, ensuring that our policies address the disproportionate impact of climate change on marginalized and indigenous communities. But we know that strong tools and good laws are only effective if we as parliamentarians have the knowledge and capacity to use them. This is why the caucus has also developed the Parliamentary Training Curriculum on Climate Change, a resource designed to educate and equip legislators with the skills needed to effectively engage in climate action. As my friend PLO will tell you, there is no inherent knowledge that comes in an elected leader. So the assumption that people will necessarily pass laws that are good is not a good assumption. So even parliamentarians need capacity building in order to produce laws that are useful to the people. This curriculum offers in-depth training on climate science, international frameworks, and the use of decision support tools to oversee climate policies and programs. It also focuses on the socioeconomic impact of climate change, providing parliamentarians with a holistic view of how our actions or inaction affect our communities. By building our capacity, we ensure that we are not only crafting the right policies, but are also capable of overseeing their implementation and ensuring they deliver the intended results. However, we recognize that complexity of climate change requires more than legislative tools and frameworks. It demands continuous learning, innovation, and collaboration. Ladies and gentlemen, the caucus commends Egerton University Law School for organizing this legal aid conference that focuses on climate change and environment justice. We welcome research and collaboration between universities, researchers, policymakers as a critical component of this journey. We know that climate crisis is evolving, and so too must our understanding of the science, the socioeconomic impact, and the solutions that can best address these challenges. We invite research institutions, think tanks, universities such as yourselves, and independent experts to collaborate with the caucus in generating new knowledge that will drive more effective climate policies. Whether through impact assessments, the development of climate-resilient technologies, or the examination of local community adaptations, research will provide the foundation upon which we build stronger, more resilient societies. Moreover, collaboration between parliamentarians, universities, and research institutions, government, civil society, and the private sector is essential to advance climate action. No single entity can solve this crisis alone. We need multidisciplinary partnerships to ensure that our policies are grounded in reality and designed to meet the need of all stakeholders. Through international collaboration such as parliamentary diplomacy, we can share best practices, advocate for fair global agreements, and ensure that Africa's voice is heard in the international climate dialogue. This spirit of collaboration extends beyond borders. We are part of a global community, and the actions we take today will have ripple effect across the world. That is why we are committed to fostering partnerships with other parliaments, international organizations, and regional bodies to exchange knowledge, share experiences, co-create solutions that address the unique challenges we all face. Ladies and gentlemen, we stand at a pivotal moment in history. The choices we make now will determine the future we leave for our children and future generations. It is time to act with boldness, with vision, and with a sense of urgency. We now have the tools for us in Parliament, the model climate law, and some training curriculum to assist us to do a little better than we are currently doing. And we must work together, drawing on the best possible research and the collaborations. The Kenya Parliamentary Caucus is currently in the process of organizing a validation workshop of its members. Thereafter, we will organize a series of trainings for members of Parliament to secure greater commitment to using these tools to their fullest potential. We invite partners like UNEP to join hands with us in this venture. We are also in the process of developing the link to these frameworks, and will welcome any contributions of researchers, scientists, and innovators and other stakeholders that may improve these frameworks as we seek new ways to address this crisis. Let us build strong partnerships across sectors, across nations, and across disciplines, so that we can leave behind a world that is greener, safer, and more just for all. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Catherine Muma, for those wonderful remarks. And great to hear that there is a commitment of Parliament, a critical institution in environmental and climate change justice, and the commitment to assist government in reducing our Paris Agreement climate commitments into workable policies that then translate into actions that influence and change people's lives. And we're also thinking about monitoring and evaluating those aspects. It's also encouraging to hear that you are already working, have done a lot in terms of developing the model climate law that encourages inclusiveness, it is focused and has justice elements into it, and the curriculum as well, and the invitation of opportunity to collaborate so that we work together. And as my colleagues from UNEP would know, would have environmental rule of law, and one of the key aspects we emphasize is that properly designed laws, fair laws, are part of achieving justice in the environment sector. So thank you very much for those remarks and the opportunity to collaborate. We hope that that conversation goes further. Without much ado, I would like to invite the country director, International Development Law Organization, Teresa Mutaza, to give us her opening remarks. Thank you very much. Please some clap as she takes the podium.
To our gracious host, the Vice Chancellor of Egerton University, Professor Kibwagi, and the Dean of Law, Dr. Ruth Aura, who's also our board member for the International Development Organization. I would also like to recognize His Lordship, Justice Angote, and Professor Kameri Mbote from UNEP. Allow me to stand on established protocols and say, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My brief, I think, is easier than everybody else who's spoken before me, because I was asked to speak very specifically to what we're doing to address issues of climate and environmental justice in Kenya. And maybe by way of background, just to say that when I was listening to the interventions from the previous speakers, I recognized that I think we've already dealt with the issues that we are all aware of, which is the impact of climate change in Kenya, and also the impact it has, I think, on the social, economic, and political development of the country. So I will not belabor those points. Maybe just to say that in addition to that background, I would like to highlight the fact that for us as the International Development Organization, we look at climate change from a rule of law perspective, and specifically looking at how the effects of climate change vary with respect to the various populations. And of course, when we talk about various populations, for us, we're looking at the most vulnerable, the most marginalized, and in that regard, we really think about what are the impacts of climate change on women, on youth, and other communities that are on the margins. And in this regard, therefore, our work in Kenya has really been about promoting climate justice, people-centered justice, to ensure inclusive, equitable, and effective responses to the challenges posed by climate change. I want to already say that for ideal law, we consider that the rule of law is a vital enabler for transformation. And to achieve transformative climate action, we think that it's important to look at it from a rule of law perspective. And what do I mean by that? We look at three things. We look at how do you empower climate-affected or climate-vulnerable communities? How do you invest in people-centered laws and institutions? And how do you enhance land rights that ensure sustainable peace? And in this regard, integral to our approach as ideal law is what we call our feminist climate justice approach, which is anchored in the rule of law and the recognition of the disproportionate impact of climate change on women and girls, especially those from marginalized communities. So explicit in our approach, really is the need to ensure women's inclusion in decision-making processes related to climate governance and the promotion and the enactment of inclusive and effective climate laws and policies. Accordingly, our climate approach therefore looks at a couple of things that I will maybe address very briefly. The first thing that we do is look at how can we strengthen regulatory frameworks and institutional capacity through gender-responsive climate policies. We have worked in this regard to promote climate governance that addresses the disproportionate impact on women and girls. We also look at how can you empower women as leaders in the climate space. And we advocate for women's leadership and participation in climate justice initiatives, especially from marginalized communities. And we do this through ensuring that women play a key role in decision-making processes related to land, natural resources, and climate policy, and climate adaptation strategies. We also focus on building resilience in vulnerable communities because we recognize the unique vulnerabilities of women in the face of climate change. Therefore, our interventions are also on strengthening their livelihoods and security in the face of the challenges they face. Specifically to the work that we do, which is what I was asked to speak about, and I'll do so in the next 2 minutes. Our work has really been looking at how do we ensure collaborative efforts to enable development of robust legal frameworks to address climate change and environmental challenges in order to promote sustainable development. And we have done this through enhancing the capacity of government institutions and fostering stakeholder engagements. Specifically, our work is anchored in partnerships for climate action. That includes civil society organizations, state agencies, as well as county governments. We appreciate that by working through this multi-sectoral stakeholder approach, we are able to foster collaboration for inclusive and equitable action that ensures that all communities have voice in the shaping of climate policies, actions, and the resources available to respond. We do 3 things, and I think I will focus on those 3 things and maybe then wind up. The first thing that we do is really scaling up legal solutions for climate resilience. We have worked in Kenya in about 10 counties, and I will highlight a few because that's where we also focus on what we would like to believe are some of our key success areas, which include Isiolo, Kajiado, Kiambu, Kilifi, Kisumu, Makueni, Marsabit, and Meru. And here we worked with the county governments to integrate climate resilience into local governance frameworks. What we have done with those counties is really work together in the audit and enhancement of climate change and natural resources policies and legislation. And that has included working through looking at the laws, but also developing laws and policies as appropriate. We've also worked with justice actors in those areas to ensure appropriate and context-specific legal solutions for managing disputes, including land and environmental and natural resource-related conflicts as occasioned by climate change. And this has seen us champion alternative justice systems as well as court-annexed mediation. We have, in recent past, been piloting the use of AJS in resolving land and natural resource disputes in Isiolo and Marsabit, looking at how we can ensure that marginalized communities are able to access justice in a way that makes sense, that is culturally relevant and accessible in their context. And we've done this through ensuring that we build the capacity of elders, not only to determine disputes, but to also determine disputes in a manner that is cognizant of the international and national gender and transformative approaches across all aspects of climate change, as well as natural resource management. We've also partnered with the Environment and Land Court, and Judge Angote will probably speak to that later, in terms of ensuring that we enhance the platforms available for justice seekers to engage with the justice system in terms of effective partnerships for coordinated and efficient administration of justice within the environment justice space. A key part of our work has been working with county governments for effective climate governance, and there we've worked to ensure the capacities of the county governments are up to the standard that engages with both international, national, and local frameworks, normative frameworks on climate change. And we do this through both capacity building, but also providing technical capacity and mentoring for county officials, including county solicitors, county assemblies, and county officials. We also think that it is important that county governments come up with plans or action plans that respond to climate change. And one of the things we've been doing in the light of FLOCA, that was already referenced, is to support the development of climate change action plans for the counties that strengthen the government's capacity to respond to climate change at county level, but also that takes into account the disproportionate impact of climate change on women and girls in those areas that we work with. And of course, a key component of that is ensuring that there's enhanced engagement between the county governments and the affected communities. And what we do is to actually provide and facilitate those platforms. And in this regard, we've started piloting in Marsabit and Isiolo what we've named the County Climate Change Gender Committees, where we hope that women and those from the marginalized communities, particularly young women and older women, can engage with their county governments in the identification of climate actions, in the design of climate interventions, and also to get a greater understanding of where the money goes with response, in respect of the response to climate change. We're finally also looking at how to facilitate access to information and public participation in the design of climate responses and climate actions. And in this regard, we have really looked at how do you provide not just information from the county perspective, but also empower the communities themselves to be able to demand accountability so that they're able to participate in climate governance from a perspective that is informed. So our interventions have included empowering communities to engage the county governments through platforms so that they're able to engage on matters finance, on matters planning, on matters identification, and on matters mitigation of climate at the local level. And I think all this we have done really is to say that we recognize that so many actors are able to respond and are responsible for ensuring climate justice. But how do you ensure climate justice in a context where maybe the community itself is not informed? So we come from the perspective that it is important to have the voices of those that are excluded at the table to engage on the matters that most affect them and to get their input in the design of those interventions. So for us, addressing climate and environmental justice is essential for ensuring equitable and sustainable development. And by empowering vulnerable communities, especially women and girls, through strengthening the capacity of institutions, we create inclusive and effective climate governance. And that is the work that we have done. And we are happy to be here to also learn from others and seek opportunities for engagement, for partnership. And I'm glad that this is a space that is academic. So I'm sure that there will also be discussions around how we can also contribute to the body of knowledge on matters environmental justice in Kenya. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Country Director, for your wonderful remarks and introducing a rule of law approach to dealing with climate and environmental issues, and your work along integrating climate change and environment into development planning, and your work in taking it to the lowest development level in Kenya, that's county governments. I think that's exciting and wonderful work, especially the integration of climate change into development so that it's not dealt with as the other, rather than integral part of development. At this point, I would like to welcome former Chief Registrar of the Judiciary, Honorable Anna Mandi, to please give her opening remarks. Please welcome her with a clap.
Thank you very much, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to ride on the protocols already established and just say good morning. I'm deeply honored to be here this morning, to be part of this conference. I just want to take this early opportunity to appreciate those who have made this happen, including the UNEP, thank you very much, Professor Mbote. Vice Chancellor, Professor Isaac Kibwage, Dean, Faculty of Law. This is actually not the first time I'm attending these conferences organized by the Egerton University Faculty of Law, and I do not take it for granted that I have yet another opportunity to just come and learn some more. The Egerton University School of Law has really demonstrated its commitment to legal aid and access to justice, which is a subject that is very close to my heart. I have been in the legal aid field for a very long time. From back in my days in private practice, I did a lot of pro bono work, and I know what it means to engage an indigent litigant. It is not just the legal aspects, it's heavy lifting. You deal with their social issues, you deal with their emotional issues, and all that. I love the subject of legal aid. Currently, I'm a patron to an organization named the Center for Moot and Research Africa, and this is an organization formed by very young, very tenacious, very focused advocates who came together with the aim of equipping Africa's youth to be able to contribute to legal and policy developments in their societies, in their countries. It is an organization that is still at its formative stages, and they're really looking forward to providing opportunities for young people to engage on social, political, economic development in their countries through transformative inclusion in major policy-making processes. And currently, they are focusing on 4 programs, one of which is legal aid, moot research, and mentorship. So they're just about 1 year old now and doing great work with very limited resources. And I see a few partners that this team has reached out to, prospective partners, and we're looking forward to great work ahead. Currently, the Center for Moot and Research Africa is engaged in developing propositions for strategic litigation aimed at securing compensation for flood victims in Baringo County. And we look forward to gaining insights from this conference that would be useful in helping us develop the proposed strategy, and we hope that the outcome of that litigation will benefit other communities or individuals that find themselves in situations of difficulty resulting from human-induced climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, this conference comes at a time when the discourse on the global impact of climate change and the widening access to justice gap is taking center stage. Closer home, we have a constitutional framework that guarantees us a right to a clean and healthy environment, which includes the right to have the environment protected for the benefit of present and future generations through legislative and other measures, and to have obligations relating to environment fulfilled. Our Constitution under Article 70 allows us to challenge any threats, any violations or infringement to the right to a clean and healthy environment through our courts, and to seek redress in addition to any other legal remedies. Courts are empowered to make any orders or give any directions that they consider appropriate to prevent, to stop, to discontinue any act or omission that is harmful to the environment, or to compel any public officer to take measures that are necessary to prevent or discontinue any acts or omissions that are harmful to the environment. Courts are also empowered to provide compensation for victims of violation. I'm happy that Honorable Mr. Justice Oscar Angote is here with us today, Principal Judge of the Environment and Land Court, and we look forward to just hearing from him, sharing on perspectives on the interpretations and applications of these constitutional imperatives in real-life situations within the Kenyan context. The Constitution also guarantees us the right to access to justice. And from all these provisions, we actually have a framework which, in an ideal situation, should enable all of us to access justice and enjoy protection from violations that could arise out of human-induced climate change, among other violations. Many countries, Kenya included, have experienced extreme weather events as a result of climate change. And just picking up from where the CEO of the National Legal Aid Service left, these events have intensified in frequency and in severity. And as this happens, people's needs for access to justice also increase. We'll all remember that earlier in the year, and I think that's the same event that the CEO and Las was talking about, we experienced severe flooding. And according to the National Disaster Operations Center, between 1st of March this year and 16th of May, we lost about 291 people. We had about 188 injuries. We had missing persons and about 55,000 families displaced. Not to mention the livestock, the small businesses, the schools that were affected during this period. Informal settlements in Nairobi were severely hit, especially those near the rivers. The rivers had burst their banks and overflowed, which intensified displacement of residents in these places. And there were appeals for humanitarian assistance in terms of mobilization of adequate food, household supplies, shelter, healthcare, sanitation, among other interventions. And in the middle of all this, evictions and demolitions followed, especially of structures that were built on riparian land in several areas in Nairobi. Areas around Babadogo, Mathare, Mukuru, Lakisama, and others. That's not to say that the more fortunate people, we don't have people with means on riparian lands. Those were not evicted, only those on the poorer side of the city. Suffice it to say that chiefs, local chiefs, members of county assemblies have been cited as being responsible for allocating land or selling in this informal settlement. So the chief will show you a spot, you'll build your structure there, you'll build a school. Remember, most informal settlements don't even have public schools. So ordinarily it will be either the chief, the MCA, or someone fairly influential in those settlements. And when the demolitions happen, we don't see anyone being called out. We don't see anyone being held accountable for those actions. Reports have indicated that many households in informal settlements are female-headed. And so women tend to bear the brunt of the evictions and demolitions. And when this happens, they become more vulnerable and susceptible to other violations such as sexual abuse. From an access to justice perspective, so many issues arise from these scenarios. And sometimes we wonder, whose responsibility is it? Because it's not, people don't just wake up one morning and the riparian area is full of people. They come slowly over time. And with time, you have a whole huge community. So who's supposed to be responsible for this? Who is supposed to make sure that this does not happen? When the flooding was going on in Nairobi and other parts of the country, I listened to a young community justice worker narrate a story, and I quoted just a paragraph of it. This is what he said. The Ministry of Interior gave 48 hours notice for people to move out. Some women had gone to the market. They came back and found everything destroyed. The chief was aware of that the demolitions were going to take place. And there was an assumption that once an announcement has been made, everyone has the information of the impending evictions. When evictions started, some were caught unawares. A 5-year-old child died. He was alone in the house, and he was trying to get something from the house when the bulldozer caught up with him. A few other people died trying to salvage some things. Then there was a confrontation with police who came and started tear gassing people. The people were not guided on modalities of moving. There was no relocation plan or any plans for food or medical services. People stay in these places because their options are limited. So we are talking about a damaged environment, and just looking at this short narration, I could pick up about 20 legal issues. And looking at the community affected, none of the victims had the wherewithal to initiate a legal claim, let alone follow it through. Legal aid, therefore, becomes the only avenue through which these vulnerable communities can access justice and approach courts for redress. Legal aid, unfortunately, has never been considered a national priority. The National Legal Aid Service, and I'm happy that the acting CEO is here, was established to coordinate legal aid in Kenya and to regulate legal aid services, which are mostly offered by civil society organizations like FIDA and the rest. And to the best of my knowledge, unless that has changed, acting CEO, legal aid is so grossly underfunded. Am I right? It is so grossly underfunded, making it a challenge for it to adequately perform its mandate. In addressing the need for legal assistance, it's very important that we think about interventions that can support lawyers. Most of the legal aid is done on pro bono basis, and the lawyers that do pro bono work receive very little support. So without support to lawyers, paralegals, civil society organizations, and other practitioners, it becomes difficult to see how those who need environmental justice can actually receive it in the manner that they should. Apart from that, there is need for regulatory frameworks that are adequately funded. It is not enough to have a legal aid service that is struggling for its own survival. So we do have an opportunity to consider innovative community-led strategies for climate justice engagement. This could include the identification of climate justice champions within communities. It could include sensitization and capacity building to help advance knowledge and equip communities with the necessary tools and skills to confront environmental injustice on the ground. And as has been said by previous speakers, this can only be done in collaboration with both government and non-governmental agencies. I remain optimistic that this conference will come up with resolutions and concrete strategies for extending legal aid to victims of disasters resulting from our own failures to preserve and conserve nature and to ensure clean, safe, and sustainable environments. And I thank you.
Thank you very much, former Chief Registrar of Judiciary, Honorable Amandi, for your wonderful opening remarks and highlighting the plight of people living in very underprivileged situations and informal settlements in this case. And I think what I picked from, among many other things, is the care we need to take when all governments, all people generally need to take when they are responding to impacts of environmental pollution and climate change, to have them so that we ensure the responses themselves don't exacerbate their condition or situation as it were. And the legal issues and claims that arise from such responses and the inaccessibility of legal aid in laying claims around these issues. From there, I will invite Honorable Justice Oscar Angote, the Principal Judge, Environment and Land Court, to give us perspectives as to how these issues are turning out, the experience in the judiciary. I welcome very much Justice Angote. I'll clap as he takes the podium.
Thank you. So allow me to ride on the protocols that were set up earlier, but let me recognize in a special way our host, the Vice Chancellor of Egerton University, Professor Kibwage, and the Dean of the Law School, Egerton University. Also in a special way, let me recognize my two teachers, Professor Kamere Mbote and Professor Lumumba, and all the lecturers who have impacted on our lives, including the Dean Moi University and Dr. Kitoko, and the rest of the lecturers who are here, and especially those ones who are committed into nurturing environmental law and teaching that subject, which most of us were not lucky enough to be taught during our days. Ladies and gentlemen, I will specifically talk about the role of the Environment and Land Court in advancing the subject that has brought us here, that is the subject of climate justice. So I'll just be very specific on what is the role of the court. The Environment and Land Court, for those who might not be aware, is a fairly new court. It is one of the institutions that was created under the 2010 Constitution, and it was operationalized in 2012. The court is a superior court, is one of the 5 superior courts that we have in the country. It has the same status as the High Court. The difference only arises that it has got a specific mandate. Other than the High Court, the Environment Land Court has a specific mandate, and its mandate to resolve disputes pertaining to the environment and land. So that's how specific the mandate of the court is. The court is all over the country. We have 52 judges, and we are in 38 counties. So we are covering more or less the entire country. And therefore, you can see this is a court which has grown from an initial number of 15 judges. I was amongst the first 15 judges, and we've now grown all the way to 52 judges with the specific mandate of dealing with environmental and land disputes in the country. And I want to thank the former Chief Registrar of the Judiciary, who played a very big role in making sure that the court gets a footing and grows in the manner that it has grown. And we want to thank all the people, including Professor Mbote, who have seen the growth of the court. Now, when we talk about the concept of climate justice, we should look at it as a framework. And this is a fairly new framework which the court has tried to actually work on so that we are able to address what we call the equity dimensions when it comes to issues of climate change. Because when you're talking about climate justice, you are looking at justice from an environmental perspective. You are looking at it from the dimension of what justice are you going to give to the people who are affected by this phenomenon we are calling climate change. The concept we've been told this morning, and that is the proper perspective, affects the social, economic, and the health and well-being of the people. And therefore, when you are talking about the health, the social, the economic well-being of the people, most of the time you are looking at the vulnerable communities because these are the communities which are more and more affected. And in fact, it has been said that although these vulnerable communities have always had problems, but these problems have actually accelerated because of climate change. If you are going to, if you are getting water 2 or 3 kilometers away, you now have to go a little bit further because most of the streams no longer exist. And that's the context in which we are looking at this subject of climate justice. How do we make sure that the inequalities, the injustices that are being visited on these vulnerable people and on people generally are being taken care of from a legal point of view. And the concept also is interlinked to the issue of just transition. As much as you are saying we should transit from fossil fuel and from other carbon-emitting energy economies, how are we going to compensate that particular transition? So that still talks to the question of what we are calling climate justice. And therefore, as judicial institutions, and as I've said, the Environmental Land Court is only or the superior institution in this country that is supposed to deal with questions of climate justice. Of course, we also have the tribunal, like the National Environment Tribunal, which in a very limited way also looks at this particular question. But the court that's mandated to deal with the question of climate justice is the Environment and Land Court. Therefore, as we discuss this phenomenon of climate change, we need to look at it from that framework, the framework of environmental law. And the framework of environmental law, the way the court looks at it, is that as a court we are supposed to hold the government and the institutions and the corporations accountable to their roles as stated under Article 69. If you look at Article 69 of the Constitution, it is very clear on what is the role of the state when it comes to matters, climate change and environment generally. And therefore, the role of the court is supposed to hold the government accountable to the promise it has made to the people of Kenya through the Constitution. That also applies to corporations, it applies to private persons, and to other entities that are supposed to play a role when it comes to upholding the environmental law. So that through the decisions of the court is supposed to shape policies, strategies, and laws. And it does this by highlighting the intersection between the justice, between the justice and the environmental law, so that you are addressing these two concepts to be able to shape the policies and the laws of the country so that they address the question that the globe is discussing, that's the question of climate justice. Now, it is, and it has always been the position of the court, that we are supposed to make sure that the governance framework around environmental law is upheld. And the court has made specific steps in making sure that we are complying with the dictates of the law and the policies. And how has it done it? I'll just mention 3 ways in which the court has been able to do that. The court has continued to enforce climate-related laws, and of course it will continue doing it. As I've already said, it's a fairly new court. Also, environmental litigation is coming in slowly. But one of the issues that the court is supposed to do is to enforce climate-related laws. We know we have national laws, we have international laws, we have policies which the country, which governs the country, and therefore it's the role of the court to make sure that those laws are being enforced, including the agreements that we sign at an international level. We have the Paris Agreement, where the government has committed to reduce greenhouse gases to a particular percentage, and therefore, as and when litigation arises as to whether those commitments are being met or not, it is the role of the court that is supposed to remind the government through the orders it makes that it's supposed to honor those particular agreements. And that includes enforcement of other laws. We have the Climate Change Act, we have the National Climate Change Action Plan, we have the long-term low emission development strategy. All these are the promises, these are the things that the government is supposed to do, and therefore it's the role of the court to enforce all these particular laws. Now, secondly, the court has offered a platform for climate litigation. We all know in environmental law that the 3 critical things that we need to afford to the citizens is, first, they must have information, they must be involved, what we call public participation in all decisions which might affect the environment, and more importantly, they must be allowed to access justice. And therefore, the court has offered the public a platform for climate litigation. And it does this through the civil society, through private initiatives, through communities, and therefore, with that kind of an arrangement, and that was the intention of the Constitution and the creation of the court should be able to enforce climate laws and regulations. And climate change litigation, you'll see this as the conference progresses, and I'm sure Professor Mbote is going to talk about it, has become a very powerful tool for holding corporations and governments accountable. It's unfortunate that the progression of litigation is very slow, but with the time we are getting there. And as I'll show, we have also, as a court, tried to enlighten the public so that the public, in one way or the other, knows that they have a platform to ventilate any issue they think is affecting them in one way or the other. We have the first, what I can call the first explicit climate change dispute, which is ongoing. In fact, I know the bench is sitting the entire of this month to deal with this particular petition, this petition number 7 of 2022. It's a matter which was filed in Egerton, where the local residents are saying that, that's the Chamus and Tugen communities, are saying that because of climate change, Lake Bogoria and Lake Baringo have risen, and in the process, they have displaced them, they have caused loss of life, and they have induced climate change, induced flooding. Professor Lumbo was just asking me, aren't these acts of God? And that's the defense. That's the defense that the government has actually raised. But you will find that there are so many other related litigation out there where governments have been held accountable for those particular occurrences, because science has shown that there is interconnectedness between the rising lakes and rivers and oceans with climate change. And therefore, the cause of what you might perceive as godly actions are actually man-made. And therefore, the communities are saying that we need to be compensated for what is going on. And it's a very interesting case. We are looking for the decision of the bench. It's a three-judge bench matter. It's one of the directly related case when it comes to climate change. And we wait to see what the judges are going to say. What the petitioners are saying in that case is that government officials have failed to take appropriate action to mitigate the effects of climate change. And I've quoted several things that the government ought to have done, including implementing disaster preparedness. They're saying we don't have those kind of arrangements or strategies. And also, what they're saying is that the government has not created long-term adaptation strategies for the vulnerable communities, so that we know we have vulnerable communities, but we are not doing anything in terms of adaptation to climate change. And therefore, they are saying the government needs to bear the responsibility. These are very weighty legal and environmental issues which the court must answer. And this particular case demonstrates how communities affected by climate change related disasters can seek redress through the courts. And